Good morning, everybody, and a happy Thursday morning to you. I hope your week is going well. You guys, we have a lot of royal news to get through, but we're going to have one bombshell story today because Princess Diana's brother, Charles Spencer, has written a new book about his sister, with the publisher promising many revelations. And Charles wants to correct untruths about Diana that have been accepted for years. Can't imagine what he's planning to reveal. And this is really going to cause problems for the royal family, especially given Harry's recent closeness with the Spencer family. I'm going to tell you why I'm watching all of these connections very carefully, but that's after we cover the real working royals who are crushing it this week. So let's just jump in and get busy, shall we? Let's go. We're going to start off this morning with King Charles. He officially marked the start of the summer break by taking up residence at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. Now, on August 18th, the king attended the formal arrival ceremony outside the gates of the historic estate. Dressed in a traditional kilt, he carried out an inspection of the Guard of Honor provided by the Balaclava Company, 5th Battalion, the Royal Regiment of Scotland. Now, I think he looks very healthy and spry here. That's just my personal opinion. And of course, I couldn't help but spot Johnny in the background, looking fabulous, Johnny. As part of the 175-year-old tradition, the king greeted the cheeky Shetland pony who serves as the regiment's mascot. Now, while the ceremony marked the official closure of Balmoral to the public, the king has already been in Scotland for most of August. He spent the previous weeks at the Castle of May. He visited local communities in Dingwall. Queen Camilla is already with the king, having attended church services with him at Craith Kirk over the weekend. I'm going to show you that in just a minute. And the rest of the extended royal family, including the Prince and Princess of Wales and the children, are expected to join him over the coming days. And this marks his seasonal retreat. But even with that, the king is going to continue to handle constitutional duties and review his daily red boxes of government paperwork while staying in the Highlands. Now, this part I found very interesting. Stationed outside the front gate of Balmoral were the first two members of the revived Balmoral Highlanders. This has been reestablished by the king after it was disbanded in 1936 under the king's great-grandfather, King George V. They are employees of the Balmoral estate, and they take part in the Braemar gathering in September. And so in keeping with tradition, each Highlander carries a ceremonial axe, wears a Highland uniform, and the uniform takes inspiration from the original uniform worn back in the late 1800s. The kilt and the plaid are made from the Balmoral Glender tartan, which was designed by the Scottish Tartans Authority at the request of the king. I think that's lovely. All right, so when the official ceremony was over and it was time for King Charles to head out, he walked out and said hello to all the people that were waiting outside the gate. They'd all been standing around waiting to meet the king. When it was time for the king to wave, that's Johnny all the way to the right. I'd recognize him anywhere, even from the back. Whew. And it was time to go in. Now, as I stated a minute ago, the king attended the normal church service on the Balmoral estate. Queen Camilla went with him. I think his treatments must be going well because the king is looking really good. He doesn't look, that pale. He's looking very spry to me. All right, let's continue. Next up, we have Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh. She was speaking on the BBC Radio 5 live special, and she talked about how the late Queen had to walk away from the doorway. They were talking about watching Team Great Britain's women's hockey penalty shootout during the 2016 Rio Olympics final. So I'm just going to blur her face out, obvious, for copyright, and let you listen to this yourself. Listen to this.
A scene for us back in 2016. So you were in Balmoral, weren't you?
I was in Balmoral, yes. And I'd been watching all of their matches all the way through. And I'd been in touch with one of the directors, so texting and sending messages to the girls all the way through, and they were doing so well. And then, they got into the final. That evening, of course, it was a completely different time zone. And so I started off watching the match, and then I had to go into dinner. And I was sitting at dinner thinking, what's going on? And actually somebody who was helping at the table, who's an avid hockey fan, kept on coming in and whispering the score to me. And we were sitting at the end of dinner, and I was twitching. And eventually Her Majesty sat there and said, "Oh, for goodness sake, just go." So I ran through to the library and I was watching it. And my father-in-law, the late Duke of Edinburgh, came through, and he loved good sport. And he sat down and he was watching it with me. In fact, actually, I think he was watching my reaction more than he was watching the television, because I was literally living and breathing every moment. I suddenly realised that it was getting to the point when, I was leaping up and screaming and everything. And the drawing room is right next door. And I suddenly was sort of conscious of this presence, and Her Majesty had come through and she was standing in the doorway watching, and it was getting so pressured. She was watching the penalties. She couldn't cope with pressure. She had to take herself away again. Couldn't cope with it. And I'm standing there leaping up and down, or sitting leaping up and down. My father-in-law's laughing at me. Then, of course, when Holly scored that goal, if you watch it back, it's incredible, because she kind of leaps in the air. She's like, yes. But the full momentum of what had happened was only when she really turned around, and then suddenly the realisation of what she'd done suddenly hit her. But of course I was in floods of tears, leaping up and down, screeching, and it was wonderful. I wish I could have been there.
A big thank you to Remoulade Sauce and to Carol M. for showing us what Sophie was wearing during this event. And now we're going to move on to her fabulous husband, Edward. He visited Dance Base in Scotland to see artists during a rehearsal and learn about the ways the charity there supports the wider community. It's based in Edinburgh, and it supports dance artists, international exchange students, and community projects across 4 studios, helping people benefit from the inspiration and empowerment that comes from dance. Let's move on to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. I told you the other day he'd been invited to Balmoral, and there were stipulations in place. He couldn't show up till the King and Queen left, and he was going to stay somewhere else. Well, he's apparently rejected the invitation. He turned it down because it's being reported he fears being treated as an outcast and the elephant in the room by the other family members. This really shows the relationship between the king and Andrew. He has nothing to gain by making the trip. His presence would make others uncomfortable, which is very different to last year, where he spent 2 weeks there last summer. Now he cuts a very lonely figure, walking around on the estate. It's being reported that Charles has not seen Andrew at all this year, despite staying just a short distance from him. Be fair, he probably would be treated as an outcast. He would be the elephant in the room. And he honestly feels he's no longer a true part of the family. And I think that's sad. And while we're talking about Andrew, there are reports he was seen with 2 women in the south of France. He's searching for a home. It's being reported he wants to live somewhere else. He doesn't like where he's living, which you can't really blame him, because people are standing on the fence. They're yelling at him. They're screaming at him. He can't even go walk the Queen's corgis. So, yeah. Now, to be fair, in separate instances on social media, older photos of Andrew partying in the French Riviera have resurfaced with false claims of who the women are and where he is. So we really don't know if he was there, but that's what's being reported. Let's move on to our Harry-Meghan stuff. First of all, Meghan Kelly has thrown her support behind Martha Stewart in her recent, spat with Meghan Markle. On her show, Meghan Kelly criticized Meghan Markle's team for trying to dispute Stewart's version of the dinner party interaction, saying that Meghan's response was, quote, incredibly stupid. Remember, the Sussex's response was to claim that basically Martha Stewart, who's 85, was confused and couldn't hear correctly because maybe she's hard of hearing. Well, Meghan Kelly pointed out, you don't try to frame Martha Stewart as a dotty old lady. Stewart is sharp as a tack. And Kelly has now said that Meghan Markle is orchestrating a media pushback because she couldn't stand Stewart taking a shot at her. Ay. All right, really quickly, you guys know I work 24 to 48 behind. So as you're watching this on Thursday, I'm taping this on Wednesday evening, and we don't have a response yet for the court decision. But the second that it comes out, I'll let you know. But yeah, everybody's still waiting around to see how much money they're going to have to fork out. All right, Prince Harry, it's being reported, wants to make another attempt at repairing his relationship with William and Catherine, but he's facing the same fundamental problem. Harry wants a reconciliation, but William doesn't. According to reports, Harry misses his brother and sister-in-law and wants to find a way back to them. But there's another reason that Harry's probably thinking about reconciliation, and that's because the 30th anniversary of Princess Diana's death is coming next year, and Harry is feeling increased pressure to resolve the feud before that milestone. Now, also, according to the latest reports, Harry is even prepared to accept some responsibility for what happened. Yes, that's right. Harry is willing to take his share of the blame if he and William can sit down for a face-to-face and work through their differences. And that's where things become complicated because Meghan does not believe Harry should apologize and move on. Meghan understands why Harry wants peace, but doesn't believe he should throw himself at William's feet to get it. And she says if any reconciliation is going to happen, there has to be a mutual sense of contrition. In other words, Harry may be willing to apologize for his part, but Meghan says that William needs to apologize and acknowledge his part. And Meghan doesn't want Harry apologizing for anything he believes he did not do wrong. And that really creates a significant problem because everything that's being said from William's side suggests he's not interested in having the conversation. Wow. Still holding out for an apology, it sounds like. Meghan is still holding out for an apology. Unbelievable. Now, this is also leading to the problem because Harry wants to go home and he wants his children to go to school in the UK, a day pupil or maybe a boarding school, so that the kids will understand their British heritage, because I think he realizes there's no way they'll be working royals. Whereas Meghan wants to stay right where she is and likes the American school system. Of course, all this back and forth that Harry wants to do because he wants more of a foothold in the UK, less courtroom drama, more trips back. He wants to see his family. And people on the internet are just they're spewing venom. Basically, what they're saying is they don't want him. Nobody wants him back there. People don't like him. And it sounds like his father's the only one willing to have him in his presence anyway, and that's only once every few years, so... As far as Meghan Markle, she doesn't want to go back to the UK. However, it is being reported that she still sees Charles as a pathway to money and power. So she doesn't mind if Harry reconnects with Daddy. She just doesn't want to reconnect with the rest of the family. In other words, it's transactional. And now with the court case thing coming up and the money that they need, she wants Harry to reconnect with the king. Okay, let's move on to what I consider to be the big story of the day. Princess Diana's brother, Charles Spencer, has announced he's written a new book about his sister, and apparently nearly 30 years after Diana's death, there's still more quote-unquote revelations to sell. The book is called Swan Song, Diana, My Sister. It's going to be released September 22nd. And Charles said he's writing it because with the 30th anniversary of Diana's death approaching next year, he's once again being asked for interviews. He says he wants to correct what he calls untruths that have become accepted over the years and finally tell the truth about Diana from his perspective. He says, I want to speak on Diana's behalf, just as he tried to do during the famous eulogy at her funeral. Now, I have no problem with a brother writing a loving memoir about his sister, but that's not how this book is being marketed. The publisher says, quote, it contains many revelations that will draw considerable attention. And that's where I have a problem, because Diana has been dead almost 30 years. How many more revelations do we need? How many more people are going to make money telling us what Diana supposedly thought, wanted, or believed when Diana herself isn't here to correct any of it or answer any of it? And Charles Spencer has spent decades, presenting himself as one of Diana's great protectors. At her funeral, he promised that Diana's blood family would protect William and Harry. But Charles's own family history is complicated. He has 7 children of his first 3 marriages. He just got married for the 4th time. There's reports of strained relationships with his older children. We know he didn't attend daughter Kitty's wedding in 2021. He didn't attend daughter Amelia's wedding in 2023. So I find it interesting that now we're being told that Charles Spencer is going to correct the record about Diana's marriage, her relationships, and her life. And it brings me to something else I've noticed about Charles Spencer and Prince Harry. For 2 men who talk so much about protecting Diana, they sure spend a lot of time keeping Diana in the marketplace. Harry has talked extensively about his mother in Spare, in documentaries, in interviews, in speeches. Every time he opens his mouth is, my mom Diana, 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 Diana. And Diana has become an important part of the way Harry explains his own life and his decisions. And Meghan, we know, has embraced the Diana connection. Diana's jewelry, Diana's legacy, Diana's family, Diana's home, Diana's grave. It's all part of the Sussex story. So now Charles Spencer has another book coming out with Diana's photograph on the cover and promises of new revelations. So really, who's protecting Diana's memory and who's using it? Because there's only one person who never gets a say in any of it, and that's Diana. You know, Diana can't tell us whether Charles Spencer's version is correct or, Harry's memories. She can't tell us what she thinks of Meghan. She can't tell us what she would think about William and Harry's feud. And she certainly can't tell us whether she would want the most private moments of her life revisited 30 years after her death. Everybody else gets to speak for Diana. Everybody else gets to profit from Diana. And that's why her memory has become completely oversaturated. The irony is difficult to ignore with Harry. Harry has spent years criticizing the press for exploiting his mother, and I understand why, because he watched what happened to her. But Harry has also repeatedly used Diana's story to explain his own grievances and promote his own story. And now his uncle is doing the same thing. Charles Spencer says the book will be positive, and I want to be fair because none of us have read it yet. Maybe it will be a beautiful tribute to his sister. But when the publicity campaign is promising many revelations, I don't think it's unreasonable to question whether this is simply remembrance. It sounds like we're going to be revisiting old battles, correcting historical records according to Charles Spencer, and of course selling books while doing it. Maybe the greatest tribute Diana's family could give her now isn't another revelation. Maybe it's to stop telling us what Diana would think. Stop fighting battles in her name. Stop using her memory to validate decisions being made decades after she died. Diana doesn't need another person to speak for her. Her life has been examined for almost 40 years. Her death has been examined for almost 30 years. And maybe it's time to let Diana's story belong to history instead of continually turning it into some sort of a product. I have one question. Did Harry have any input into this book? Because we've seen something similar before. Remember when Finding Freedom was published? Harry and Meghan publicly distanced themselves from the book and denied collaborating, only to find out during Meghan's court case that they did. And then Meghan had to apologize for failing to remember those exchanges. I wonder if Harry discussed this new Diana book with his uncle, particularly when Harry recently spent time at Althorpe and they spent time at Harry and Meghan's house in Montecito. So if this book is supposed to correct decades of untruths, whose version of the truth is he planning to correct? You get what I'm saying? I also want to say, I think this picture you're looking at was released with Charles Spencer's approval because he's trying to drum up, the curiosity for his book. I don't think they're just discussing the book this first time, but if this book starts echoing some of Harry's grievances about the institution, William, Charles, the way Diana was treated, then I think Harry's closeness with the Spencer family becomes much more interesting. Harry has a lot to say about his mother, and some of his own revelations about Diana have become so unusual that instead of getting people to talk about Diana's legacy, they get people talking about Harry. Like, for instance, in Spare, Harry admitted he kept a lock of his mother's hair in a blue box in his bedside table, and he talked about consulting a psychic who told him that she was getting messages from Diana. Grief is deeply personal, but Harry chose to put all this stuff into a book and sell that to millions of people. And once he did that, they became part of the public discussion about Diana. And that's where we've ended up. So instead of talking about Diana's charity work, her impact on attitude about AIDS, her work with landmine victims, the way she changed the relationship between the monarchy and the public, instead we're talking about her lock of hair next to Harry's bed, psychic messages, how Diana's spirit has moved from William to Harry, or how about the Elizabeth Arden cream? And as a result of this, people that would never have made jokes about Diana now have started making jokes. How about Jimmy Kimmel and his book, The Prince and the Penis? You know, this is the contradiction. Harry has repeatedly said he wants to protect his mother and preserve her legacy, but some of the weird, bizarre conversations that are now attached to Diana's name exist because of what Harry chose to say publicly. And now, again, Charles Spencer is promising more revelations. I just don't think this book is going to be good. This book has the potential, by the way, to create a real headache for the royal family. Not because we know what's in it, we don't, but because we know who's writing it. Charles Spencer isn't a journalist interviewing people who knew Diana. He's her brother, and he knew what was happening behind the scenes during her marriage to Charles, or so he thinks he does. He lived through their separation and divorce. He was there during a few tense days after Diana's death. So when the publisher tells us this book has many revelations, my first question is, revelations about what? Because Charles says he wants to correct untruths that we've accepted over the years. Well, what untruths? Is he going to challenge the way Diana's marriage was portrayed? Is he going to reveal previously unknown conversations with the royal family? Is he going to revisit the way Diana died? Or is he going to say something about William and Harry and the different paths they've taken since Diana died? We don't know. But Charles Spencer has never been afraid to criticize the establishment when it comes to Diana. I mean, remember what he said at Diana's funeral. So if he decided now, 30 years later, that there are things about Diana's story that needs correcting, Buckingham Palace is going to be interested in what he has to say. Then you've got Harry again, who spent years publicly challenging the royal family's version of events. So while there's no evidence that Harry's involved in this book, given their recent contact, I would be interested to see whether Charles Spencer's version of Diana's story happens to overlap with Harry's version of the royal family. Because if it does, this stops being simpler than another memoir about Diana. This could open some old wounds. And this book could potentially shake things up for the royals, not because we know what's coming, but because Charles Spencer is telling us there are things we still don't know. I am very curious about what you think about this book. Do you think he's really protecting Diana's legacy and correcting the record, or making money, grifting off of his sister? I mean, after 30 years, is it time for the people who say they love and protect Diana to stop using her name to sell books, tell their own stories, and fight old battles? And most importantly, what do you think these revelations are going to be? Don't forget to let me know. Put your comments down. Don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button and the bell for all notifications. Then go down into the description box where you'll find the link to my Twitter, my Gettr, my Rumble, my email, a link to my father's book, which remains up for sale on Amazon, a link to my Amazon wish list, as well as a physical address. For those of you who have donated to my coffee fund, thank you so much. And as always, you guys, have a great day.